Everyone thinks racism is like calling black people the N-word.
Welcome back to part 2 with Nick, Robbins, JR Rivas, and Josh Forti. We're going to talk about racism.
Society has started to tiptoe around this subject, and that's when it gets really awkward.
First, we need to define racism.
My initial thought was societal stereotypes.
Stereotypes like black people commit more crime in America. Then the opposite side of it is black people are prosecuted at a higher rate.
If there's truth to the stereotype, is it fine? But if it's not true, then it's racist.
It becomes racist when the stereotypes don't go both ways. Those stereotypes exist because of how black people have been treated in America dating back to slavery.
Is America really that racist compared to the rest of the world?
America is probably the least racist. America has given the world the best. What's different about America is we have the most diverse culture in the world.
I'm a big believer in diversity with a caveat. If you're aligned by some set of core values.
But the one thing that America will always have over the rest of the world is culture. Culture is influence. For the most part, we should probably just stop talking about race in America.
Welcome back. We're going to talk about racism. And let me set this up, and I'm going to turn it over to you. I get a text. JR was the first person on the podcast. I get a random text from him out of the blue, which said, I'm going to read it because it's funny. Racism. He said, "Let me come back on the pod." I said, LOL. Okay, what do you want to talk about? I think all the bullshit around racism would be interesting. I think my experience being black in America, what I think about racism, how racism works in other countries, which I'm very curious about, and just flow from there. I'm down. Here we are. Welcome back.
First of all, I love talking about racism with white people.
With white people?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's one of my favorite things.
Why? Because they get super weird about it?
It's just because like I say things and they're like, oh, I've kind of thought that, but I can't say that because like
because I'm white.
There's like this crazy double standard for sure. I heard this joke the other day on TikTok. What's the difference between Batman and a black man?
I don't know. Batman's rich.
Batman can go out at night without Robin.
That's actually
so I thought
it hurt.
so I tell that joke for a reason. Do you guys think that it's racist that you laughed at that joke?
No.
I don't think so.
Okay, why? Like why? Why isn't it racist that you laughed at that joke?
Because it was funny. Oh,
why is it funny?
All right, so I'm gonna go back in. I'm serious. Put my serious face on. First, we need to define racism.
Okay. Wait, let's get the Webster.
All right, let's go to Webster because I think that I want to make sure we're working from the same thing. Because in today's world, racism, I don't even know what it means anymore. Yeah, to be honest,
that's good. Well, I make fun of Christians, homeschoolers,
everybody.
Yeah,
prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular race or ethnic group, typically one that is in a minority or marginalized. That sounds like it was updated recently.
Yeah, it does. Which they do.
Yeah, they do. I think my initial thought, I think that's a good question to start with, but I think my initial thought was like stereotypes, societal stereotypes in any group of people or like sector of things, like whether it's a certain sports fans, right? Or a certain homeschoolers or like whatever. Like there are general stereotypes about those things. And if you made a joke about homeschoolers or I didn't, everybody laughed. That's not racist against I guess race isn't part of it, right? Mm-hmm. But I guess stereotypes. But if you're defining that stereotypes against as a whole would be racist, then yeah, maybe like second degree racist or like second level order consequence racist. But
why are stereotypes, like why do they exist?
I think some of them exist because of it's fact, and some of them exist because of people they're made up.
Statistically, are Asians worse drivers than everybody else?
I actually don't know. I would assume not, but maybe.
Right. So then where did that
actually, I don't know. Are they?
I don't know.
Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. Statistically speaking, are Asians worse drivers than others? This would be funny. If there's no credible statistical evidence to support the claim. All right, that's cool. All right.
Okay, so that's
well, that's just okay, because it came from the eyes, and then you're okay. I got you.
So that stereotype essentially is not hurtful because it's not true. But when you say like, for example, the joke that I told, that joke could be seen as like, well, you're basically saying black people commit crimes at a higher rate, so are inherently more violent as a society than everybody else. So from that perspective, you're basically laughing at the joke is laughing because there's some truth in it, or there's seemingly some truth in it.
Seemingly some truth, or there is some truth?
I mean, people laugh at the Asians driving jokes all the time.
So there's perception.
There's no credibility to that claim.
Stereotype,
But, you know, so stereotypes like that, for example, black people commit more crime in America. There's the whole statistic of black people are 13% of the population, but 50 or 60% of the prison population. But then the opposite side of it is that black people are prosecuted at a higher rate for the same crimes. They get longer sentences, harsher sentences. Like Kanye says in one of his songs, he's like, Jerome gets more time than Bradley. So
in a lot of places it is.
So but if you look at black people that were born in the UK or black people that were born in Africa, do they commit a higher crimes, a higher rate of crimes than everybody else disproportionately in every other country? That's the data you'd have to look at to say, is that seemingly true? Right. So in the answer, I mean, my answer is, I don't think that you guys are racist because you laughed at that joke. Obviously I'm hanging out here. Like, I think the joke was funny. I grew up my entire life, like, telling jokes of, I went to school with Mexicans and Arabs, and my school was like 10% white, but everybody else was black, Hispanic, or Arab. So everybody had jokes for everybody, but we all, got along and hung out, and it was fine. Like, I never once looked at one of my friends and thought that they were racist growing up, no matter how many like jokes that I've heard. So the interesting thing is, like, the reason why I sent you that text was because I'd watched the movie Am I a Racist? And I've seen how
Matt Walsh.
I've seen how society has started to tiptoe around this subject. And me personally, as a black person, like, it makes me uncomfortable to think that like a white person has to tiptoe around, or that they're tiptoeing around a subject, because like if Nick, for example, if you tried to like not laugh at that joke, I feel like that would be more racist because you're like, oh, I can't laugh at that because he's black. He's been marginalized, suppressed. It's insensitive. I think that's more racist than laughing at that joke. So for me personally, like, have I experienced racism? Yes, but it's in the same to me, it's been in the same context of you guys laughing at that joke, in the sense that, like, for example, I went on a date with a girl one time, and she was like halfway through the date, it's going well. She's white, right? I mean, it was in Denver, like, so she goes,
which is wild, by the way. I looked up the stats after you said how that's here. I'm thinking Denver's all diverse and all that.
No,
Denver's so white.
Denver County, Denver County
no
it's like 90%.
It's wild,
Denver.
Dude. Yeah, we're supposed to be so diverse and cultural. No, we white.
So we're on this date, whatever. She's like, it's going fine. She's like, I told my dad I was going out with a person of color today, and his response was, I thought I raised you better than that.
Damn.
And when she said that, like, I did not feel any bit of like hurt. I thought it was like funny that like I'm on a date with this racist guy's daughter, but it wasn't like, oh fuck, like, I can't believe like he thinks that way. That's super. He's such a shitty piece of shit human being, which like, whatever, he probably is. But I just looked at it as like, it's just kind of, it's a funny scenario that I'm on a date with a guy that's racist and with a girl whose dad is racist. Yeah. And, now, and like, he wouldn't be able to stomach that. So when I look at it, it's kind of like, when you think of racism in America, you think of like, I think of my experience where like, I grew up super poor. I'm wealthier than 99.9, probably 99.5% of the country. Growing up black, super poor neighborhood, I was able to kind of rise up, where if society was suppressing me, I don't think that would have been able to happen. What happens to a lot of people though is they feed into like, well, America is racist and they're not, that's why I'm in the position that I'm in. And it's an easy scapegoat to blame other people.
Yep.
Now, if there's an interject whenever you guys have a point, but if you look at countries that are actually racist, so I'll give you two examples. In Dubai, if you get into a car accident and you're a foreigner and the person that you hit is a local, that crime is not getting prosecuted. They're going to side with their own. That is a form of racism. If you go to Japan,
is that racism or cultural? Or
they're basically saying it's discrimination based on ethnicity, race, or class.
Okay.
So if you go to Japan, for example, so in America, and I thought every country in the world was like this, if you are 9 months pregnant, you make a break. Let's say you live in Mexico, you're 9 months pregnant, you make a break for America and you have your kid. Here's the border. You have your kid right here in Texas. Your child is an American, can get citizenship, can get a passport. In Japan, there is no path to citizenship unless you are of Japanese blood. So even if you are dropped in Japan, you're born in Japan, you are not Japanese. Even if you're Chinese and you're born in Japan, you're not Japanese, right? So they try extremely hard to keep their culture homogenous. No one's ever said Japan's racist. It's the most racist place on the planet. But if you look at I was born in America. I'm in the process of getting my Dominican citizenship by birthright. Both my parents were born there. They're like, you can be a citizen of our country. That's not the case in Japan. Both your parents, even if both your parents were born in Japan and you're born in the United States, you're not going to get citizenship.
Even if you're Japanese?
Even if you're Japanese.
Oh.
No. I've learned this because my business partner's mom she's 50% Japanese. And I was looking at I was trying to help him get a second passport. So I started looking, I was like, your best bet is probably birthright. I started looking at the rules in Japan and there's no way. Everybody in Japan is Japanese and they want to keep it that way. Nobody has ever been like, let's cancel Japan. We need to stop going there. It's extremely racist.
Well, okay.
And if you look at it from that lens, America is probably the least racist country because every other country that you go to, in Dominican Republic, great example. If you are Dominican, if you're born in Dominican Republic, but you're Haitian, they did a mass deportation where they were like, hey, we're not going to deport you guys. We just want to get a census of who's in the country. They made everybody write down their stuff. They came, stole their farms, stole their animals, sent them back to Haiti. They're not even citizens of Haiti. They were born in the Dominican Republic. They've lived there their entire, it'd be the equivalent of us sending someone who's Mexican, who was born in America, back to Mexico after they've lived here their entire lives. Would never happen in the United States, but it happened in the Dominican Republic. Haitians also happen to be black, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about all of the rules in other countries to gain citizenship, you just see other countries. Bro, I went to Greece. I was walking down the street through a market. This guy yelled he was like Jay-Z to try to get my attention, to try to sell me shit. That would not happen in America. Again, I just thought this is hysterical that that's the only black person you know in America. But it's an example of how we have been conditioned to feel like America is in this extremely racist place. Most of the racism that I've experienced has been either undercover. No one's ever outright came out and called me the N-word. But I'm sure that I've experienced with that girl. If she didn't tell me that story, I wouldn't have known.
Yeah. Well, do you think that though, so going back to the Japan example, to me, that seems like when we think of racist in America, there's systemic racism and then there's individual racism, right? I'm being or you're a racist, I'm a racist, whatever, right? It's like that. So in Japan, it seems like that's just a countrywide, like a government or a societal thing.
Wouldn't that be systemic racism though?
That would be systemic, right? That would be systemic. But because, technically America was Indians first, right? But because
Native Americans, you racist fuck.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah, racist. But you see what I'm saying? Because Japanese, like they've been there. It was there. Like that's where they're from. Like all the way back in the day. I don't think they ever went and colonized Japan, did they?
Yeah. So if you think about it, like,
gosh, man.
So
I had no idea it was like that in Japan.
Think about the why. They know that by keeping a homogenous culture where most people think the same, they can keep society the way that they want it.
That makes sense.
So exactly, it makes sense. Is that wrong?
Well, do you believe that, like in the Bible, it talks about the Tower of Babel and how, I mean, when Earth was originally created, there's, just Adam and Eve, right? There's one language, there's one, all of that. But then the Tower of Babel is when God introduced language and made people not be able to talk to each other, and people had to scatter about because they were trying to build a tower all the way to heaven, right? And a lot of Christians believe that that is when the different races and the different what the heck is it? Languages were put in, and then people scattered from there. So where do you believe the different cultures originated from? Do you think it's like from an instance like that?
I mean, it's not a coincidence that the darkest people are from the equator. So it could have been, I've seen Africans that were born albino and are white. So it could have been like a genetic mutation that just made people different over time. Or it could have been people have changed based on where on the planet they evolved. Because if you were born in somewhere near the Caribbean island, like the chances are you probably wouldn't survive just because of, without modern technology, just because of the sun and the effect it would have on your skin. So it makes sense that people would look different just based on the different parts of the world where they are.
Yeah, I feel like that's might answer some of it, but I feel like that's not for all of them, right? Like there's some pretty wide ranging varieties of people.
Yes. But I mean, there's genetic mutations all the time that even on studies that they've done with dogs, the more you change the dog's emotional characteristics, the more you change the physical characteristics. So that's how dogs.
Interesting.
That's how dogs evolved from wolves, because they got the most docile one. Well, the most docile one doesn't need all their teeth to be super sharp, and the one that is bred to hunt, the one that's going to be better at hunting is the one with the slightly wider head. And that's how we ended up with bulldogs and stuff like that. So ultimately, like maybe changing up if you procreate with somebody and you're both super shy people, like you might have a child that's a little bit smaller or a little bit shorter, versus if you're both
really
outgoing or whatever. I'm just saying, I'm not saying that's proven. I'm saying based on the example with the dogs,
okay.
The different breeds were all created from wolves. So how did they end up with like a black lab from a wolf, or these different colors that we've never seen in wolves before? So I think the same thing could have happened with humans, or the biblical story where different races and all.
Well, I think that's just where it started, but I mean, there's clearly been a lot of that. That's interesting.
I got a question, man. Because we were actually talking, this circles back earlier in the conversation. I kind of want to touch on this. You said that you felt it would be more racist if I tried not to laugh.
Yes.
So what's interesting about that? My wife, for those of you who don't know, she's Iraqi, okay? And her parents are Arab, moved here, immigrated here. She's first generation. She saw the movie Am I Racist? Mm-hmm. The other day, we were walking past a black lady. And Sema told me, that's her name, she was like, I was afraid to smile too hard at her, because in Am I Racist, it's like if you smile at someone the wrong way, like it could be termed as racist. And so like her being Iraqi felt a certain type of way because of the messaging that's being spread. Mm-hmm. So is that a common thing you think it is held, or like how do people feel about it? Because I've always wondered, because I'm like, bro, do you really, I mean, I don't think that anybody would want me to think that I should feel afraid of them or talk to them. You know what I mean?
So if I'm in a room with all white people, and I feel so the crazy thing is, you guys as white people have never been in a room where you're the only non-white person.
Oh, I've been in a couple. Yeah.
I mean,
well, you're white, so you can't be in a room where you're the only.
Oh, where I'm the non-white. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought you meant. Okay, yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So you've never been in a room where you're the only non-white person.
Gotcha.
So for me,
we are white. He's talking about not that there's a bunch of black people and we're the only white person. It's we are not.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
That's so I was like, wait, what do you mean? Yeah, like.
So for me, it's like
cultured, JR.
If I'm the only non-white person, and I can tell that, if someone's going out of their way to include me, I appreciate it. But I feel like they would do that for anybody or whatever. But if someone's going out of their way to make me feel like they're not racist, that's when it's fucking weird.
Okay.
Like,
yeah,
it just gets weird. So, I mean, in that film, like that was the main scene. He's basically talking to this like DEI expert who wrote a book called White Privilege or whatever. And
this is Matt Walsh.
Yeah, he's talking to her about how he's like, okay, so walk me through like role play. Let's say I'm a black person. You smile at me. I feel like it was a microaggressive smile. And then I report you to HR. How would you apologize to me? And then they role play it, and it's just so ridiculous. So I think the more we've like gotten to this like DEI plays talk about race all the time, the more it gets uncomfortable, because then white people feel like they have to go out of their way to make it seem like they're not racist. And that's when it gets kind of creepy and really awkward. Granted, like, I don't know. I've been to weddings. I was probably there was another black guy, I think, at your wedding.
Gerald was there, right? Yeah. Gerald. There's a lot of Arabs.
Like,
Sorry.
In a room like that.
Was that racist? Fuck. Now I'm making my...
So in a room like that, like,
this conversation is way better.
I definitely like, bro, you walk into a room, if there's only two black people, we'll always make eye contact and like give a little head nod. Like, I know that I saw you and you know that I saw you, and like we're like shit goes down, like we're kind of in it together. That's what the nod communicates. So goes back to tribalism. It's like, okay, how come just because this person looks like me, I'm assuming I can trust them if some shit went down. But I will say, like, I've been at events and there's two other black people, and they end up coming up to me and like they'll say like, oh, let me come hang out with the other black people here, but not they'll use different terms.
Yeah.
But essentially it's like, they're like, okay, this room is predominantly ran by white people. Let me come find comfort in people that look like me. So is that racist? Like, no one's talking about race. No one's offended them in any way.
Like reverse racism, like racism, like against, like against white people, that they're bad and you're good, or just racism is like, oh, we're just gonna hang out.
No, like I feel more comfortable around my own kind. That's essentially what that is communicating.
But isn't racism always negative? Like, it's like you're discriminating against the other.
So if I say he's probably good at basketball because he's black, that could be positive, but that's still a stereotype.
Okay, that's what you're saying. Okay, that makes sense.
And then the whole thing with like, okay, here are some comments that I've gotten that do irritate me. When I got in shape, I had a friend, he's Asian, got in shape, got a 6-pack, and we're working out at the gym. I'm like pushing way more weight than him. He's like, oh, it's because you're black. And I'm like, that shit irritates me, because I'm like, you don't care about all the hard work that I've done. I've been dieting for 2 years straight, counting every fucking calorie and going to the gym 5 days a week while you are just being a fucking fat ass.
Yeah.
And I'm jacked because I'm black.
Do you think that, like, black culture, white culture, they're different? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, but any group of people's cultures are going to be different, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's what I was going. Right. But like, you're going to have, or Mexican, Native American, like whatever, right? You're going to have these cultural things. And I feel like if you were to take two different things and intertwine them, some of the things that one culture might think are normal might be weird to another culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so because it's different, like, that's why it's going to get called out. Not even because it's like good or bad, or just it is. And so like labeling something as different with a stereotype, like, I feel like that just happens no matter what, right?
I mean, going back to the stereotypes, why do stereotypes exist? Pattern recognition, right? So like, I mean, it's a survival instinct in a lot of ways. That doesn't mean they're accurate or they should be used or any type of stuff. But if you're in a bad neighborhood late at night, I don't care whether the person's black, white, Mexican. If they're wearing a hood and I'm like in a bad area that I know of, I'm going to cross the street. And so like some of it's survival. The question really does come down to like, why do you feel more comfortable, with people that look like each other? And there's been so many studies on this. You guys we're business people. You know that if you put specific testimonials on a page and you show them to certain people, they're going to be more likely to come through.
Dude, when we run ads with me, we get all Arabs and Indians. When we run ads with my business partner who's Asian, we get a lot of Asians.
This goes male, female too.
Yeah.
When we brought Sema into the ads, I used to, for some reason, women never wanted to come through my ads. It was always guys. We put Sema in pictures. Guess what? Females start coming.
Yeah.
Through. It's pretty wild stuff. So then it's like, is it ingrained? Like, what do we do about it? Like, is it good? Because you guys are asking great questions. It's like, is a homogeneous society good? Is diversity for diversity's sake good? Right? I'm not saying one way or another.
Oh, actually, that's a good, interesting question. What do you think? Do you think it is? Diversity for diversity's sake?
So, okay, you got to look at the biggest experiment of diversity ever, which was America. America has created the best, bro. I went to Spain one time. I got into a heated, drunk debate with everybody at the table. America's the best country in the world. They're like, no, it's not. It's horrible. Blah. I'm like, you're saying that as you hold an iPhone, wear Nikes. I'm like, you listen to fucking American music everywhere we go in Spain. They're playing American music.
Wait, hold up. That's why you think America's the best country in the world?
No, I think America has partially, but America has given the world the best movies, the best music, the best entertainment, the best products.
Mm-mm.
And like, what's different about America is we have the most diverse culture of any country in the world. Like you look at what happened with hip hop and how that seeped into culture throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s. Look what Jewish people have done in entertainment and in music, and even Spanish music, like a lot of it comes out of the United States. So vehicles, the car was invented here. So when you look at how all the great things that have been given to the world have come out of as a result of having diversity in a country, because if it wasn't because of the diversity, then other countries would be at the top of innovation.
I want to add a caveat on this because it's super fascinating.
Yeah,
so
that's an interesting perspective.
I agree that it is the biggest melting pot by far. And I'm a big believer in diversity with a caveat. If you're aligned by some set of core values, in this case, it's freedom of speech.
I was going to say the
Constitution, and all the people who immigrated here, including some of his parents, came here, built a better life. I mean, Arabs, she owns 2 liquor stores. You know what I mean? They do great, right? And so having that different mix of pots has been amazing because it's brought so much good stuff into the fold. But in my opinion, there needs to be some level of like values that we align with outside of just different cultures.
Yeah, but even that, okay, here's another example. A lot of people come to America and don't share American cultures. For example, when I was in high school, same thing. I had a girlfriend that was Syrian. Our relationship was a secret from her entire family. Syrians, at least in Allentown, Pennsylvania, they cannot date outside of the race. Can't even date a white person. This is common. White, brown, black, whatever. Right? They definitely look down on black people a little bit more. But
yes, they definitely do. Yeah.
The whole relationship was definitely was a secret. Right? And when I had like talked to my Syrian friends, they're like, we came here for opportunity. We didn't come here to like mix with bloodlines and shit like that. And I'm like, okay, so you wanted to come to America. You wanted to take the Harvard. You wanted to get the movies, get the car, get the degree, get the job, all provided by America being a melting pot. But the one thing you wanted to preserve from your culture was you just want to be homogenous. I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because if your thought process worked, it would have worked in Syria. You guys would have not had to come to the United States. And that's what pisses me off about that kind of racism, which is like, you just want the best of the American culture, but anything that you don't agree with, you're like, I'm just gonna not take part in that.
That makes sense. I've never actually thought about it from that perspective of that's the reason why America is like producing so much things, because like the best of everything. I always thought that was like a portion of it, but like I looked at it as like the idea that humans have inalienable rights, the idea of freedom of speech, the idea that of ownership, like at mass level, the idea of access to capital, right? Going back to the debt conversation, even, right? Access to capital, the idea that we are because we control the money and have like geographically, like America's like set, like we're the gold mine of it all, right? We have immense resources or whatever. We're a spending nation, right? We spend more than any other nation, right? Like I always thought that like all of those things played into it. And also we had a wide variety of different people working on it. Because like you look at like German engineering, for example, right? Like the Germans produced some, especially during like Hitler's time, right? Like they produced some pretty crazy stuff, like like technology wise, right? So that's interesting.
But the one thing that America will always have over the rest of the world, even if the dollar's not number one, even if it's the Chinese yen as the world reserve currency, is culture through Hollywood, film, and music. And that's why China's trying to infiltrate Hollywood, and they're trying to fund films and say what you can and can't do in them, because culture is influence. And that I would say that's probably one of the most special products that has been produced in the United States.
Would you say that that's all because of free speech though? Like I feel like free speech is the bedrock of that all.
Yes and no. I think that if you're watching a movie, for example, that's made in why don't we watch fucking Bollywood films in the United States that much? Because it's all Indian people and it's all based on Indian culture, so we're not really going to understand it. So when you have a movie like War Dogs, for example, where the main dude is Jewish and he like fakes wearing a yarmulke to gain support from other Jewish people, like that movie would not have come out of Israel, right? Even if it was made with all Jewish people. So you need different cultures and different cultures' experiences. Same with music. Like there's a lot of African music that influenced hip hop, that then influenced R&B, that then was influenced in jazz and pop and all that kind of stuff.
So it would seem like you're saying that like take the concept of free speech. The free speech might have been the thing that would have allowed for America to happen in the structure, like keeps the opportunity, but the actual production of what comes out of it is from all the diversity of culture.
Yeah, I mean, when people used to come in through Ellis Island in New York City, you sign your name in a book, they hand you your credentials, and they're like, "Welcome to America." Gary Vaynerchuk talks about how that's how he came to America. So like the diverse, they were like, everybody's welcome. It wasn't like, hey, if you're black, you can't come.
Yeah,
here.
but if you took everybody in America, all the different cultures or whatever, you put them in North Korea, bro, you're not getting the same output.
No, definitely not.
Because of that.
Yeah, 100%. That, and then the core values, and you bring up a really good point earlier too along this, in regards to racism. So as someone, I grew up in California in the Bay Area, I have seen, and this is my experience, I know racism exists. I think it's interesting when people say that only white people can be racist, right? My experience is other cultures. You mentioned Syrian. I've seen it with Arabs. I've seen it with Asians, and all for a lot of reasons, it's very discriminatory against black. Interestingly enough, it's an outsized return based on the experience I've had and seen with other cultures. And it's like, is America really that racist compared to the rest of the world? And it's interesting the perspective you're bringing, and you've done research and you've been to these places and looking at this stuff. You know,
every country I've been to is more racist than the United States.
That's fascinating.
And even bro, Indians are racist against themselves. They have a caste system where if you're a Patel, you're up here. If you're a Gujarati or whatever, you're down here. Like it's insane. So racism, some could argue it's part of tribalism, which is part of human nature.
Why is tribalism part of human nature? Dang it. All comes back to morality and human nature. Okay, that makes sense. Interesting.
So another question. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Do you guys think black people are better at sports?
I think the data would say, well, which sport?
Let's say NBA, NFL.
And the data would say so.
Okay, why?
Because they're more athletic. Because you're black, bro. Come on, I can't have six pack because I'm
so more athletic. Why are black people in America more athletic?
It probably has to do with genetics. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the answer.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
I think so.
Okay, so if you take 1,000 people of any race, you put them on a ship for 3 months, starve them, deprive them, whatever, half of them die. Do you think the ones that survived are stronger genetically or weaker than the ones that died?
I mean, this is very Darwinistic, but stronger.
Okay. So when you put black people on a ship, you bring them to America, half of them die, half of them survive. The ones that survive ultimately are going to be the ones that are more muscular, more enduring, taller, bigger, stronger, whatever. So then they have kids, and their kids are, if you're two people who've survived slavery, half your family died on the ship because they weren't strong enough to make it on this journey, then your child is going to be inherently bigger, stronger. So when you look at, for example, football, I mean, a lot of people in America, if you're black in America, your ancestry can be traced back to slavery at some point. So genetic
what percentage of black people in America like have migrated, like have immigrated here versus or
most black
here?
people that are in America, like especially if it's in the South, like Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, a lot of the states that produce like the best football players, chances are they had ancestors that were slaves.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
So when you look at, for example, Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, I think he talks about how more Olympic runners come from like this one African village or something. And he's like, well, it's because they run a lot more in that part of the world.
Yeah. They like run like 100 miles like all the time just cause. Yeah.
So obviously like, there's maybe a lot of white people in Norway that would have been great Olympic runners. They just never ran because culture it's not a thing. So I think that, slavery plus, the way that cultures have produced, better athletes in basketball. And
so are you saying you think that black people in America, because of their ancestry, do have better genetics? In general,
for
because
building
of the way
muscles, running fast, jumping high, stuff like that.
Yeah, because I mean, and how much of this would be a cultural component? And so what I mean by that is like a lot of people, the way out, right? They see it as playing sports and training from a young age and being on.
Yeah, in the South especially, like it's back to the Malcolm Gladwell example. If you're born in Georgia, like you watch college football is God. It's bigger than anything. So from a young age, like you're like football is cool. Whereas like maybe in Colorado, like you might play soccer or something like that. So obviously more athletes are going to come from those areas. So I think that's part of it. Do black people in general have great genetics for football and basketball? No, I can't fucking dunk a basketball. I'm not that fast. Like I did take a DNA test and it said that I have a propensity to build muscle over running endurance, which is definitely true in my experience. But I don't think just because I'm black, that doesn't mean I can run a 4.5.
Yeah. So how does that affect?
Because the reason I brought it up is because the stereotype is black people are good at sports, black people are fat.
Right. So, but if
you only build muscle because you're black,
if the stereotype is true, right? Like if there's truth to the stereotype of wherever it originated from, then is it fine? But if it's not true, then it's racist?
No, I think the racism comes in where there's stereotypes for black people that are negative, but so many amazing things. And also, like I grew up, both my parents were born in Dominican Republic, so I'm technically Hispanic, but for the sake of being in America, I'm black. Like I get pulled over, the cop sees a black guy. So it becomes racist when the stereotypes don't go both ways. Like people don't look at, especially people who are somewhat racist, they just look at all the negatives stereotypes about black people, but they're not like, oh, well, black people have brought a lot of fucking culture to. Black people are the most copied culture in the world in terms of dressing, in terms of like slang and stuff like that. It brings so much culture to America. Stereotypically are never rewarded for it, but it's just like, oh, there's that black guy stole something. Black people are 50% of the prison population, 13% of the population, which are statistics that are put out there to basically say black people are inferior.
Well, so
not taking into account like the conviction rate, how we get convicted at higher rates for the same crimes.
Okay, so the one statistic I do know is that when you compare black on black crime compared to black on white crime compared to white on white crime, like black on black crime is like the highest by a lot.
Okay, so let's talk about that because what a racist would say is like, well, black people are just naturally more prone to violence. The way that I think about that is if you, again, is a black person that's born in the UK more likely to be more violent than a black person that was born in the south side of Chicago or as violent? Probably not. So environment is a big factor. Well, people would look at that and say, well, black people did this themselves. The reality is, in the United States, there has been laws. I just took my real estate course. There's laws in there talking about redlining and block busting, steering certain people away from certain neighborhoods. And then when you take laws in like the 1940s to 1970s, where Candace Owens talks about this, the government said, I'll give you welfare and government assistance to any black family as long as there is not an adult male over the age of 25 or whatever. So essentially there couldn't be a father. So Nick said earlier, people will act in accordance to their incentives. If you're not incentivized to keep your family together, then the chances of it happening are fairly low. So the reason why like religious people stay together at a higher rate is because there's so much external pressure to stay together. So there's incentive to stay together despite, if you're miserable or whatever. So ultimately, there was this systemic racism meaning laws put into place to keep a certain ethnicity or race down. There was systemic racism in the United States at one point. I don't believe there's any law written today that is a law that's designed to keep a certain group or class down. That's why I don't say that there's systemic racism. But when you take a group of people, you enslave their family members, where you don't allow them to own a house, which is the biggest way that people build wealth in the United States. Your parents own a house, they pass it down to you, they pass it down to you. They buy a house and they pass that house down. It builds wealth within the family. When you don't allow a class of person to do that in the United States for 100+ years, and then you start offering them social assistance to not have a male figure in the household, of course that class of person is going to behave more violently because they're going to be in poverty at a higher rate. Yeah. So at the end of the day, like the idea that black people are dumber or commit more crimes, it's all put in place. Those stereotypes exist because of how black people have been treated in America dating back to slavery.
Yeah, I definitely economically, when I like found out about like redlining and like also like when like you're more likely to get approved for like funding and loans and capital mortgages, things of that, if you're white versus if you're black, certain areas of that, access to that definitely made sense from an economic perspective. It is interesting though when you brought up the religious thing of like how there's religious pressure to stay together versus in the case of the government giving out like in a black community, it's like if the father figure's not there, you get assistance. That's interesting. And also then, do you think that, imagine, this is completely hypothetical, but I'm curious, is like if there was a level playing field, meaning like society had 10 different, 10 different starting, or 10 of the same starting points and 10 different realities where the laws were universally applied to everybody from the get-go. Do you think that the black community would end up differently than the white community from a people staying together, from a marriage? I mean, from a marriage perspective, from an economic perspective, from a violence perspective, a crime perspective. Do you think that they would, if they all started with the same factors, do you think that they would end up this is different?
No, because when you look at,
you don't think they would end up different? You think that?
No, I think it'd be an equal society.
So do you think that, like, what are the differences between a white person and a black person besides the color of their skin?
Right now, today?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I would say I would use Jewish people as an example. Some of the most prosperous group probably. And then you look at their values and it's like community. If a Jewish person's getting a loan for the house, they're going to find someone else Jewish. They're not going to go outside of their community. Essentially kind of the same thought process as Japan. And in the Jewish community, if you hire someone for a job and they make a mistake, you're supposed to hire them again and have them fix that mistake and then give them another chance. So, and let them know where they went wrong. So all that creates, community and prosperity. A dollar changes hands in the Jewish community 19 times. In the black community, it's like once or twice before it leaves the community. Yeah. So ultimately, I think, those are Jewish values, which are religious values. It's the same with like the Christian church. Like if you're getting your roof done, you're going to go ask around at church and you're going to try to find somebody that's in church to make sure that the money kind of stays within the community and the community prospers.
Yeah, I think some Christians do. I definitely don't. Like, who does the best job? I don't care. But okay, so that's from a community level, which that makes sense. From a single, like an individual level, like black person by themselves, white person by themselves. The difference between black and white, just without cultural influence. Like, is there anything different? Like, as far as, I mean, obviously DNA from the family it plays into that, but like, do you think that there is anything different with them, like how they function, think, operate, whatever, besides just the color of their skin?
No, I would say that the main difference over the last like 50 years has just simply been black families have a male in the household at a much lower rate. And part of that is an issue with the government incentives. I pulled this up. Have you guys heard of Black Wall Street? So Black Wall Street was basically Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was a really strong black community. They had like their own stock exchange.
Oh yeah, I have heard of this.
And then it ended in the Tulsa race massacre, where essentially there was a race riot and they burned down like this. So black people had built a community. They were kind of operating like the Jews. They were keeping money in the community. They had built their own strengthening part of town where they did business with each other. That it's one of the most horrific stories in American history, other than like the Trail of Tears and shit like that. But there was some black person was accused of a crime by this white guy. I think it was the R word for YouTube's sake. And they came out looking for him. They looted, burnt down all the businesses out of essentially fear and anger, and nobody was prosecuted. So even when like black people finally started to like build their own community, operate self-sufficiently, it was kind of destroyed. So that's when I bring up, you'll probably hate this one, but I do think that there is a case for reparations. Not because I fucking love handouts.
Wait, why would I hate that?
Because you hate like handouts and stuff like that.
Sure.
But I would say the argument would be this, and I'm not saying like I've fully fleshed this out and it 100% should happen, but the idea on the table, Native Americans have gotten reparations in the United States.
Yeah, big time.
They have, yeah. I don't know if this is true, but I've met people who are like, oh yeah, this girl I went to school with, she got $8,000 a month from the government because the government took her family's land and built, and they have a casino and all this stuff.
It's crazy.
They have casino resorts that there's a lot of laws that don't apply on a Native American land. Like there was actually a payday scam that violated the law, but they had like partnered with these Native Americans and ran the whole thing from their land. So the government couldn't do anything. So when you think about like, okay, home ownership is the number one way that people build wealth in the United States. Black people haven't gotten that, not have never, because we have that opportunity now. But at
a much lower rate. Yeah.
At a much lower rate. Yep. And the average person that builds wealth builds it with a house. Black people haven't had that. Also playing an instrumental role in building this country through slavery, and have gotten absolutely nothing, not like no apology, or anything like that.
How would you how would you know?
I don't think it should be handouts. I don't think it should be money. I think it should be like, there is a scholarship fund that you can apply for. There is, you can get a grant for your first time. It should be, I think if anything, it should be centered around homes. You should be able to get a grant for buying a home for the first time. Or even when black people do go to college, 99% of the time or 90% of the time, they're taking on massive amounts of debts. Every person that I know that went to college ended up in massive amounts of debt. So they're actually even worse off by getting an education. So I think there should be something, because we've offered it to other people in the past, and black people have had a big role in building the country. So there should be programs or scholarships or something. I'm not saying cash. I'm not saying like anything like that.
That makes sense.
You should have to work for it, but it's simply just if black people are starting the race back here and we're both expected to get here at the same time, we're just asking to get us here. Just get us to the starting line. We're not saying like get us to the finish line. Just let us start at the same place as everybody else. I will say this as a black millionaire in America, I am an anomaly. Like by the grace of God, I've been blessed. I had a single mother. I've been blessed with amazing friends. I have a good solid mind that I did nothing to earn.
Yeah.
And I've been able to figure out my way in America. But I've met people like, I know we all believe like you're a master of your own destiny, your own fate. One time I was in Atlanta. It's 4 a.m. We're at IHOP. Me and a bunch of my friends start smoke. We're waiting for the food. It's taking forever. My friends start smoking weed with this black girl who was just kind of hanging out in her car. I think she was like an Uber Eats driver.
Yeah, I think you told us the story.
She was telling the story of how growing up, she's been raped multiple times. So to tell that person that like, you know, you should just pull your pants up and grow up and like the opportunities equal for everybody. Like when they've been through hell, it's just really like, yes, she can do it 100%. Like Oprah's done it. It's been done before. One of the best movies or docuseries I've seen has been the Madam C.J. Walker, the first female self-made black millionaire ever. So there have been people that have been able to do it, but that person is starting the same race that we're all running way back here.
Yeah.
Not at the same starting line as everybody else.
Yeah. It seems as though too, it's like you have to factor in like the culture and the community, not like the individual person when you're talking about this, because like for example, I didn't grow up with money, like around, my parents didn't pay for college. Like I didn't go to college. Like we didn't inherit money. Like, you know what I mean? Like I started from nothing per se. And so this concept of, oh, I got special treatment because I'm white. I'm like, no, I didn't. Right. But it seems what you're saying is that if the culture as a whole, right? Like if all of the people that I'm around, right? If the people that did go to college, they were able to go to college because they got treatment that the black community did not. I benefited just from being there.
I think you started at the starting line. That's how I'd put it. You didn't start like privilege is getting an inheritance and starting way up here, right? I'd say you started at the starting line.
So what is below the starting line then?
Below the starting line is single parent household. Like,
got it.
Not to make myself seem like I fucking am so amazing, but like my mom made $400 a week. She was an immigrant. She was a single mother. She made $400 a week as a waitress. And I walked to school by myself since I was 5 years old. I remember being 5, walking to school, to and from school. I'd get home. There would be nobody there until 11 p.m. So, ultimately that's what
that makes sense.
So a couple questions on this. Since apparently I hate reparations and all that stuff.
Yeah,
which, by the way, you are freaking awesome, man.
I didn't mean that.
Even the way you're articulating this is beautiful. And I just have questions in regards to it, right? One of the first questions I would ask is, how would you know when somebody's here? Right. So let's table it. Like, how do you know?
Okay. So I would say the starting line.
Hold on. He said table.
Yeah. How do we know when something's equal? And then what kind of precedent do we start to talk about when somebody who had nothing to do with slavery, what was taking place, is now paying for things that took place that their ancestors did? How far back do we go?
Yeah. So I don't know if like, because your great grandfather was a slave owner, that you should have to pay reparations.
Yeah.
But if you have a multi-million-dollar mansion that used to be a plantation that's been handed down in your family, there's an argument. But I will say the U.S. government was the one that allowed this, and
totally, it's evil.
There was reparations paid to the Native Americans. So I know it's possible for the U.S. to reach into their pocket and give and establish these programs, especially when you see like how they give money to Ukraine.
But has the money, then this is a separate conversation, because I love where you're going, and all I want is everyone have an outcome. And I actually have a lot of thoughts.
Wait, have an outcome?
I'm sorry, not an outcome. Has an opportunity. No. Misspoke. And I want to get back to what I think is like really the best gift that one can give. But like, and I'm not an expert on this by any stretch of the imagination, but from what I've heard and what I've seen and looked at, the money given to the Native Americans hasn't actually benefited most of the people that live there. Don't they have the highest rates of drug and alcohol abuse?
Yeah.
Don't they have all these issues? So like, it kind of just goes like, does just giving money, and that's why, like you said, opportunities, you want.
So I'll say this, I think
like I
have, in a way, I kind of have received reparations because I went to a charter school that was for underprivileged Hispanic kids. They just never openly said it, but we had like one white kid in the whole school, and this wasn't a public, so you couldn't just enroll.
Just so you know, that's like what I want to build. Like we're going back to the charter schools, for inner city kids specifically, to teach them a lot of this.
Dude,
stuff,
I got to like play music.
I
got so lucky that I got into the school. My mom like really, bro. My mom like went. So we moved around a lot. So I came in mid-year. So think about, you're coming in mid-year in a school that not just anybody can join. There's like a massive wait list. She like basically just cried in the office till they felt bad for her. And she was like, she's like, I'm a single mother. I work all day. I cannot put him in public school. She's like, I can't. And they're like, well, we have a wait list, blah, blah. She's like, I'm telling you, like, I'm not leaving till you get him in here. They were like, let us see his report card. They looked at my report card. Literally, the lady's on the phone with, I don't know who. She's like, well, there's one C on his report card, but everything else looks good. They're like, all right, let him go. I came in like the next day to school.
Amazing. And I think I love that type of stuff, to try and give everyone an opportunity from an educational standpoint. My issue with giving money, I'll use the COVID stimulus checks everyone got. Going back to my wife's father owned a liquor store. You know what everyone did with their stimulus checks? They went and bought top shelf liquor. He couldn't keep it on the shelf. It was like the most profitable 1.5 2 years of his life.
That are meme coins, baby.
Like he literally couldn't keep it on the shelf, top shelf stuff, right? And so it's like, all right, fundamentally, like, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? And if we're trying to get to the same starting line, this will circle back to what does that mean? Because then it's also like, well, what about the, meth heads in Appalachia, right? Like, who grew up in meth head family? That's the culture over there. They're the poorest white people in the country. There's so much poverty. I mean, there's more white people in
But
deep
was that
poverty.
created by...
yeah, that's the argument.
That's the argument. Was that created by the government, or was that allowed by the government, or is
True.
it just
I guess this is more getting back to
unfortunate...
the starting line thing, because if we start saying everyone needs to be at the same starting line, then where does that end?
Well,
where
also where the initial injustice came from, which, like with the Native Americans, you could argue, or like it's like we took their land, whatever, right?
What if
and
government comes and shuts down a pipeline in
yeah.
a white community, and then no one can work there anymore because that's the way the family was paying for it, and that one's poor, right? So, like, I'm not saying the government doesn't have injustice.
But I get what you're saying.
It's more of like, how do we get there? Because I would love to get there, but then it's also like, how do we get there? How do we know when it's solved, right? So, like, what does it mean? You need the same starting line.
What is the same starting line?
Yeah. How do we get there? How do we know when we're there? Because here's what happens when people get the same starting line is everyone's going to start making different choices, right? And so, like, I've looked at white privilege. Yes, sure. If you want to say I have white privilege, that's fine. Like, I mean, to me, it's just kind of like, okay, I don't know what it means not to be. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, right? But what I've always felt...
Comment on that in a sec.
Okay. Well, yeah, what I've always felt is like the biggest privilege that we can have in this country is what zip code you're born in. Mm-hmm. Meaning, like, do you have rich parents or not? And do you have two parents, right? Because, like, you look at
super disagree, but that's interesting. All right.
You disagree with that? Yeah. As far as the biggest privilege? Okay,
yeah.
What would you say the biggest privilege is?
Two-parent household.
Okay, two-parent household zip code. I guess but if you're a two-parent household, I guess we could talk on that, right?
Yeah.
But basically, if you're in a rich zip code, then the parent...
Don't get me wrong. I agree that money in a zip code, yes. But the number one,
right?
I think it's two parents, yeah.
Interesting. All right. So
I think that's my biggest unfair advantage in life. That is number one out of anything is the fact that my parents stay together and actually kept us together as a family unit.
I never thought about incentivizing not to have a two-parent household from the government. I mean, because people can take their welfare, but I've always felt that, you look at it and it's like 4 generations later, like, I don't think this is doing good for people, but I've never thought about it incentivizing otherwise.
Yeah.
That's
So
really
on the white privilege thing. So I think that they say privilege is invisible to those who have it. I'm not saying like you guys are white, so you don't see that you have white privilege.
That's
I'm saying
I'm
as a male, like I have privilege, like I walk around at night and I'm not afraid for the most part. Which, funny enough, men are more likely to be assaulted by another man than women.
That's interesting.
The first time I ever consciously had realized that I had like white privilege was when we were in Nashville.
That's a great example. So we're in Nashville. We go to a gas station, me and Josh. I think it was just me and you. Maybe there's a couple other people. Josh pulls out a blunt and smokes it. A joint blunt. I don't know what the difference.
Yeah. There's a difference, but yeah, it was a joint.
Josh pulls out a joint. Do white people smoke blunts? I don't.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
we do. Sometimes. I'm just saying, like, it's a little bit different. Like, I'm a blunt in public than a joint. I mean, joint. It is a little different.
Okay,
but yeah,
pulls out a joint.
Regardless.
This is before. I don't know if weed's legal there, but it's legal here. But this
was not legal yet.
This is like 2018 or something.
I don't even know if it is legal.
He pulls out a joint and starts smoking it in front of the gas station. Like the gas station door is here. He's like off to the side and he's just like smoking it. And I'm like sitting in the car and I'm like in shock. And I'm like, bro, what are you doing? He's like, what? I'm just smoking a joint. And he's like, I was like, what if a cop pulls up? Like cops go to gas stations all the time. He's like, I don't know. I'll just put it out. And then I was like, bro, that's so far. I'll give you another. That's so far from my like perception of reality. Like I would never think to do that. Another example. This one's probably even better. Me and my ex-girlfriend were driving from Vegas to Florida. Driving through Texas, small town, we get pulled over. As we're getting pulled over and the cop's like about to start walking over to the car, she's in the passenger seat, I'm driving. She opens the glove box and starts digging through it. And I freaked the fuck out. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Stop moving. She's like, what? I'm just grabbing the registration for him. And I'm like, bro, in any traffic stop. And then I told this story to my friend and his wife, who are both white. And she was like, wait, what's wrong with getting the registration before the cop comes? Like, that's how deep, like, the privilege is, that you don't even, privilege is invisible to those who have it. To where I'm like, the last thing I would think to do is fucking dig in my glove box. Oh, there's a cop behind me.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like every male that I've told this story to understood it right away. Females, sometimes they're like, what's wrong with that? Yeah. So, that's an example of like, okay.
Sexist.
That's an example of like a privilege that somebody in that position who's been pulled over a dozen times and every single time they grab the registration would never understand, but something that I would never think to do in a million years. So, this is where I think true, I guess, white privilege does exist, is everybody in society, the majority of authoritative figures, the president, every judge you've ever seen, the majority of cops you've ever seen, the majority of CEOs in America are white men over 6'2".
Over 6'2"? Really?
Over 6'2", yeah. So the vast majority of people with authority in our society are white. So there's like the association, that we have the association bias in every instance. So the association that you have when you meet a white person is like, well, you know, every person I know that's in power and the vast majority of CEOs and successful people and have all been white. But when you meet a black person, it's like, okay, well, I've heard these negative stereotypes. We really don't get the credit we deserve for culture in Hollywood and stuff like that. So there is privilege just in the inherent fact that the majority of society is run by white people. So you take advantage of that association bias by default.
Now, on that note, and that it's likely true, also most of the country is white, so it would make sense that, you know, especially the majority of the authority is out there. What about like attractive privilege? Tall privilege. You just said 6'2". Attractive privilege. There's many privileges. And so then it's like, okay, I believe you, especially when you talk about like, you know, grabbing for the license thing. Like I 100%
by the way, I think the justice system specifically is this single, like, is the biggest issue with racism. Like, has the most negative effect.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I've had a lot of traffic stops in my life. All but one have gone extremely smooth. And the one that didn't, I was driving at night from New York to New Jersey to Pennsylvania. I didn't know where I was. In New Jersey, I don't know if you guys have ever been, but you can't pump your own gas. There has to be an attendant at every gas station. So after a certain time, it's really hard.
What happened to America, bro? Yeah.
Oregon and New Jersey, only two states. Yeah. So it's hard to find a gas station after a certain time. So I'm like lost. I'm looking for, I'm on my GPS. I'm like trying to figure out if the gas stations that are coming up are actually open. Get pulled over. I'm in a 1989 Chevy Celebrity. And the cop walks up to me. First, he shines the fucking flashlight from his car. Basically to try to get like a description.
Yeah.
And then he walks up. Hey, how's it going? Where are you headed this evening? Oh, I'm just coming off the interstate. I'm trying to find a gas station. Isn't the interstate way over there? Where are you coming from? And what were you doing there? And where are you going? And what do you do there? And then repeating the questions to see if I'd give a different answer, probably for like 10, 15 minutes. And do you have a job? And what do you do what kind of job do you have? And how long have you been there? And what were you doing again in New Jersey? And what part of Pennsylvania do you live in? And I'm like 18. So I'm not crying racism yet. I'm just like, okay, fuck, like this guy's asking me a lot of questions, but I'm staying super, super cordial and cool. by the end of it, I finessed the fuck out of this cop. He was like, when he asked me what I do there, I was like, what's the best answer I can give? And I go, I'm in school for criminal justice.
That's
then
gosh.
And then
so you're the reason that they're stereotypes.
by the end of it, I can tell he kind of felt bad for profiling me. Didn't even give me a ticket. He's like, okay, well, just slow down because there's a park over here. Meanwhile, it's fucking 11 o'clock at night. He literally said, slow down because there's a park over here. And the closest gas station is down there to the left, whatever. Gave me directions. It was super nice after that. But that's an example of like, okay, was that profiling or was it pattern recognition? I know that I was on that highway. A lot of people traffic drugs from New York to Pennsylvania. So has he just had 12 traffic stops with people that look like me and he ended up busting them for coke and narcotics? Maybe. Was he profiling me a little bit based off that? Was it unfair? Probably. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, put yourself in his shoes. He didn't fucking rip me out of the car. He didn't beat me. He just asked me more questions than he probably would have asked someone else.
Do you think that actually I think you had a question.
I do have a question. So this is something I find interesting and I'm curious your thoughts on this. So, and this recently got removed, but let's use Harvard scores, right? SAT scores to get in. You know how they basically were actually discriminating against Asian people and lowering them, and then they were lowering the bar for Black people to get in. Mm-hmm. Do you find stuff like that useful, good for the community? Like, how do you feel about that?
No,
okay.
No, because then you're basically telling the Black community or whoever, like, you're not good enough to clear the bar, so we need to lower it for you. And that's a harmful ideology. It's a harmful mindset.
That would be my thought, and then but I'm not in your shoes, so I don't know.
It's the same thing as like, I don't like when people go out of their way to show me they're not racist. Like, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, I need to tiptoe around this person because of their skin color. So I need to go out of my way to make them feel comfortable. I need to go out of my way to make sure that they get into this school so that we're not racist.
Yeah. Do you think that the average person of color deals with racism that affects their life in any significant way on a daily or regular basis?
I would say being a Black female in a professional, like, white male dominated environment is probably very difficult.
Okay.
But I would say being a female in a white dominated environment or in a male dominated environment of any race, like being a female construction worker you're probably harassed all the time. There's sexist jokes all the time.
Yeah. So
I would say on a regular basis, no, because like I said, I don't think racism is systemic in America. Dude, I've had like my old roommate, he ran a business. It was a sales somewhat organization. Straight up told me, he's like, I see a Black name, I just throw their application out the door. So, and he was like Guatemalan or something like that. So,
well, because like, what I said earlier,
there's so much more. But and I think that's probably one of the best points of the whole thing is the fact that so many all the countries are way more racist. But like when I lived in the old apartment up there, right? Like we were the minority, right? Like it was like 60-70% Indian or some other race. White was by far the majority. And like where we shopped next door at Walmart and all the places compared to where I live now, where I mean, this is predominantly white here, and it's only 50 minutes up the road where I shop. Like I notice zero difference in my life shopping at where I used to shop versus where I shop when one of them had more people of color and the other, this one is more. But like to me on a daily basis, I'm like, I go get my groceries and I come home and do so to me, in my daily life and interaction, even when I was in the slight minority, right? Like I didn't notice difference, but I'm wondering if that is just because of my. Yeah, like, does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I mean, I would say a lot. So everyone thinks racism is like just calling Black people the N-word, and like, that's what a racist looks like. But one of my best friends in high school, she was white. She wanted to date a light-skinned Puerto Rican, and her dad, who's like literally like we would all sleep over at this girl's house, and we would hang out with them for Christmas, and her dad was super accepting. Her mom would cook for us and all this shit. Told her no. And she's like, why? And his response was, let me get one. And his response was, that's the way I was raised. That's like the number one response for a racist is like, that's how I was raised. So that makes it right. So racism is not always, it's not always systemic. It's not always like, I hate black people. A lot of the times it's literally just like, it's stuff like that. Like, I'll accept you guys. You can come to my house. You can eat. I'll cook for you. I'll treat you like family, but don't date my daughter, kind of thing. And this guy was like light skinned. He was in the military. Her dad loved the military still, like no go. So, and she had arguments with him because she's like, you'd rather me date like some white dude who's a bum than date him. And he's going to the military and like is trying to do better for his life. And her dad was like, yeah, straight up.
I just can't even fathom.
Yeah.
That.
That's
I mean, it's just like, just nothing,
like, who cares?
Nothing that I was ever around ever had that type of conversation.
Yeah.
You know, like, and growing up, all my heroes were black. Allen Iverson, Tracy McGrady. I used to play
that definitely makes you not a racist.
No,
I
can't say it, but I mean,
I have a black friend. I'm not racist.
So you're talking about culture a lot here and like the appreciation of it. It's like some of those popular people in the world are. And it's just crazy when I hear stories like that because I know it exists and I've seen it exist in every single race and culture. But it's like, man, I just never was around.
Bro, I had an aunt growing up. Bro, this is crazy. I don't like this aunt, so I'm going to tell this story. And we were going to an all-you-can-eat buffet. We walk in. Bro, keep in mind, she's like my color. But Dominicans don't think of themselves as black. And she's like, oh, I hope they don't seat us next to black people. I'm like, what the fuck? And I mean, most of the racism I've experienced has been like fractional here and there. Like I was a busboy one time and there was two servers talking and they were like in earshot, female servers, Caucasian, and a group of black people walk in and she's like, oh, I hope I don't get that table. And then the girl's like, what do you mean you don't like serving N-words? And she's like, no, I like them. No, she was like, what do you mean you don't like N-words? She's like, no, I like them. I just don't like serving them. Granted, stereotype, black people don't tip. It's very true. Like I've seen it. And I over tip to compensate for every black person who's never not tipped.
Yeah.
But same with Indians. Like,
bro, I mean, trying to sell Indians and Arabs services, man, haggling, like it's just in their culture. It's
a lot of our clients are Indian. So
yeah, you probably,
bro, at one point, like probably 70% of our clients were Indian. I was like, why do they always haggle? So the reason is actually because of their government. They implemented a rule that there had to be like a minimum price, but retailers could advertise a retail price. So basically the government incentivized everybody to haggle because there was like a minimum price that they couldn't go under, but they could, but essentially like everybody knew that everything was negotiable.
Dude, that's crazy.
So when you're selling an Indian person, you have to tell them like, this is the retail price. Like this is the minimum retail price. Yeah.
Whenever a doctor would come through as Indian, I'm like, all right, here we go. Let's get ready. Price was never the price. And it's funny with my wife, you know, Arab, Iraqi, she always wants to negotiate everything. She wants to like negotiate down our power bill and the utility bill. And maybe we can get $20 off here. And I'm like, man, it's cultural. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. But to the point, like when I see the movements of like all white people are inherently racist and you need to unlearn your racism, like the Matt Walsh movie, I think you guys should watch it for sure.
Oh, it's hilarious.
I plan on it.
It's like, they make it seem like it's an exclusive to white person thing, that racism is exclusive to, bro, I've seen extreme racism towards white people because white people were the minority in my school. They'd say,
why do you think it is? Like, why do you think that they?
I got beaten and jumped half to death for being white. Like, and there's been multiple times in neighborhoods when I lived in Berkeley. That was in South Sacramento. Like, I mean, I was left. I got phone, wallet jacked, broken nose, all that stuff. Was in a collared shirt walking out late at night with, they're like, hey, white boy, come over here. You know, blah, blah, blah. Bam, popped right in the
Anyone
face.
who's a minority is always going to be discriminated.
And I lived in Berkeley for a while, right next to Oakland, and there's some places we just shouldn't go. And there was multiple times, and these guys were looking out, they're like, hey man, like you should probably get out of here. It's getting dark. Like, you know, you're not safe around here. Mm-hmm. They're like warning us. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. You know, so like I've seen it, like you said, whenever it's a minority, that's interesting way of putting it. Like, why do we do that? How do we end this? Like, how the fuck do we get rid of this? Like, this is so gross. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Okay, well, okay. So do you think the reason that it's so prevalent of like people being like white people should unlearn their racist, you know, they're being racist and all that is because they're in the minority, right? So
Well, a lot of the
majority,
people, if you
sorry,
watch
majority.
the movie, a lot of the people that are preaching like anti-racism are white people.
Yeah.
Like liberal white people.
Dude, have you seen that comedian John B. Christ John B. Christ? He's like a Christian comedian or whatever. He's like, dude, white people's solutions to racism are always so funny. He's like, we got rid of Aunt Jemima, right? Right? And then he's like, dude, I never thought of this until he said this. He goes, Jake from State Farm, he used to be white.
Oh shit.
Bro, he used to be white and they just swapped him.
Did you know that the Redskins are gone, right? Do you know that the Native American, who the Redskin, it was made in honor of a Native American tribe. The tribe is trying to get him to change the name back.
Yeah, they're just pursuing him.
That shit's so dumb. It's so dumb. Like, I saw this TikTok where this guy wears like a Mexican sombrero and like a fake mustache and has like a mariachi kind of type drip. He goes to like a college campus in the US and he's like, is my costume racist or is my outfit racist? And they're like, yeah, I think it's cultural appropriation. You should definitely take that off, blah, blah. He then goes to Mexico in the same outfit and asks Mexicans like, hey, do you think my outfit is racist? And they're like, no, I just think it's funny. So crazy, it's like the things that people actually think that the left thinks are racist aren't actually racist. And I think for the most part, we should probably just stop talking about race in America because it's not a systemic issue. There's not a single law that is designed to keep a person of color from rising up. I think what we could work on,
I was going to say, what's the solution?
Not judging people as harshly who started the race back here. Granted, like, of course you commit a crime, you're going to jail no matter what.
Right.
But
except for in California.
Except in California. And maybe just helping to establish programs in communities. Like another way that I would say reparations, when I was 14, the local Boys and Girls Club, they partnered with a church and started a program called Midnight Basketball, where they were like, they ran the statistics and found that most crimes committed by minorities under the age of 18 happened on Friday between like 9 and 12. So they were like, we're going to have a basketball league between 9 and 12. And we would come out, we would play. There was 4 teams. So there'd be 2 games. While the other team's playing, you're like in a room and they're teaching you like, bro, they were teaching us debate. Like they're like, okay, you guys have to argue for gay marriage. You guys have to argue against it. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to come up with your argument. One person has to present it. And then you had to do that to play basketball. They wouldn't let you like play and then leave. If you did that, then they wouldn't let you in the program anymore. So stuff like that, where like someone decided to fund that, a bunch of volunteers, the Boys and Girls Club put up the gym. That helped me a lot because I got to meet people who like had career. Bro, I never met somebody that was a college grad until that program, other than like my high school teachers and stuff like that. So that really helped me out a lot to see like, oh, maybe the world is a little bit bigger than I thought. We had a career day where this guy came in and he was like, he gave us a list of careers and their salaries and the education requirement. I went straight to the salary column, went straight to the bottom, found the ones that paid the most, and it was doctor, lawyer, engineer. And then I was talking to him and I was like, man, this kind of sucks. Like my grades are not that great. And he was like, oh, well, there's another option that's not on there. And I'm like, what? He's like, oh, it's what I am. It's called an entrepreneur. And he's like, I actually never went to college I never went to school other than to learn how to fly my plane. So that was like an explosion in my mind. I was like, you can make money without going to college. Like that's insane. So all these little moments to me really helped me along my path when I didn't have somebody at home that was like guiding me. For the most part, I raised myself. My mom was at work from 3 to 11 every single day.
I had no idea. And it's so cool to hear about the charter school and all these other things because, and I've gotten into arguments with other white people about this where they're like, oh, well, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Just go find a library. I'm like, in my experience looking at it, I'm like, if you're not brought in outside influences or experiences, it's going to be hard to raise people up or give them different levels of education that are currently taking place. Cause I don't think anyone thinks that education is typically that great in inner city schools. So like hearing that that's like helped you, like that's always been one of the things that I want to do is go drop that in there and provide different experiences and opportunities. Cause I don't think it's as simple as, hey, just pull up your bootstraps. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I mean, and I know I said earlier about like that we should have agency, but like, I also understand there's certain conditions that take place that make things very difficult, to think long-term, right? And as far as that, as that goes. So that's, dude, love hearing that.
It's interesting. I think the whole midnight basketball, that was, how that was like a privately done thing. Someone funded it.
It was put on by the church. local church.
Dude, I'm telling you this, if we go back to the full conversation, I'm like, get rid of government, all private sector.
Bitcoin solves racism because it gets rid of tribalism, baby.
Bitcoin doesn't see color. Bitcoin doesn't see gender. It doesn't see sex. It doesn't see age. It doesn't see race. I don't care, right? But I'm saying like, I think that like that, like I think that the government wants to solve morality problems. That's the church's job. And they want to solve economic problems. That's the private sector job, right? Like the government, shouldn't, I mean, it should exist.
I will say this, that program wasn't 100% success because I know at least one person that is in jail for selling drugs that was in that program with me.
But no, the fact that it even exists, but what I'm saying is the fact that it even existed. But like, I think, actually, I'm going to ask you this. What do you think if you could change, if there's one solution, like one thing that you think would have more impact in the world today, I'll say specifically to America, whether it's like just in general, like one thing, if you could change, you have universal power, like fix this, like what do you think would have the most impact?
Bro, I'd say more people going to church. There, I would say, okay, here.
Interesting.
Bro, in America, we're so like separate where I realize this because my business partner moved into my apartment building and we live one floor apart from each other. So it's me, my girlfriend, him, his girlfriend. Our videographer moved into the same building. We hang out at least like 4 times a week. We cook together. We grilled. Like last week, I had everybody over and I was like, let's find a YouTube video on like on like a painting and then let's all try to paint it. Bought canvases. We ate steak. We sat there, drank wine, painted, talked, like just the community feel that most people don't have. That I think about like when I lived in Tallahassee, for example, like I didn't know anybody there. I had no family there. Like my whole life, I was fine. Like I was probably decently happy, but I didn't realize how much I was missing the community aspect until I got the community aspect. So I think that's one thing that would greatly improve everybody's lives. And then of course the morality of, because even with church, like when you first start going, you start to question your morality. Like you're like, is sex before marriage a sin? Is that something wrong? Is it wrong is the way that I'm worshiping or the way that I'm treating money idolatry? Like, am I worshiping money or am I building relationships? Like last Sunday, so I've gone to church twice so far in Denver, the last 2 weekends in a row. The last Sunday, the message, like I came in here like just expecting normal church. This guy brought his sons on stage for like 2 minutes, and his kids were young, like probably like 9 and 11 or something. And he kneels down to his sons and he's like, I love you. I don't love you because you play football. I don't love you because you get good grades. I don't love you because you're good at these things. I don't love you because you're funny. If you didn't have I love all that stuff about you, but if you didn't have all that stuff, I would still love you. His kid starts breaking down, bro. I start breaking down. And then he's like, he turns around to the crowd and he's like, he's former drug addict. He's like, if I can love my sons that way, despite everything I've been through, imagine how much Jesus loves you. And it was like the whole room felt it. And I'm like, bro, everybody could have benefited from that message. If not only just to see like how much this guy loves his kids, how important family is, a reminder of how important family is. Like I see that and I'm like, bro, I've definitely been missing out by like not being a part of something like this for a while.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's cool. Yeah. So that's good. I think the number one thing that would fix that, church is definitely up there. I think it's fathers, like men stepping up. Like if you put fathers back in the homes, period. Like if men just stepped up and did their jobs, I think most of at least American decline of everything would all starts because the fathers.
Yeah, I mean, how many people in that room were like, "This is the father that I need to be to my kids. I need to step up." Like,
yeah, but like love it. Like when I say that the biggest advantage that I had in life biggest privilege, like the biggest competitive advantage that I have is 2 parents together. Like my parents didn't teach me about money, right? They taught me hard work and morality or whatever. But like I know 100%, no questions asked for any reason, the end, that my parents love me, right? both of them. Like if I murdered someone, if I did horrible, awful things, and then I called my dad, like the very first thing he would say is like, "Are you okay?" Right? Like that's it. Like because I know he loves me, and the same thing with my mom. And I saw a structure where they were committed to each other, and they had their rough patches, and but they fought for it, right? And like having that structure, when you start to look at the rest of society that doesn't have that structure, it's like I feel like everything comes back, like structure and structure in society comes back to that, like starting with a strong father figure in the home. And when I mean a strong father figure in the home, I literally mean not a piece of shit, right? Like there's a lot of fathers that are present but are complete pieces of shit, right? Like that's not what I'm talking about. And I think that that women, particularly mothers, have been asked to play the role of mother and father. And it's been the most detrimental.
Bro, I text my mom Happy Father's Day every Father's Day.
Right. And it's been,
Really?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
because it's like, and it's the most detrimental thing to society, because like women are supposed to be moms, and it'd be like you're asking them to do two things. It's not what it's for. And it's like men have failed. They have dropped the ball so strongly. Like so much, right? And like all of it can be attributed, or most of it can be attributed to the fact that they just are a piece of shit. They don't step up and lead. And I think that if you could solve that, then most of the issues, I know that America would not be where it is today if you had that issue. Yeah. I mean, if you solved that issue.
Interesting. Yeah. I like both those answers. Surprised you said church.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
But
fascinating.
it's new. He texted,
That's
bro.
the simplest, fastest path. I was telling you earlier today, like as someone who I'm very big on belief in spirituality and believing in stuff and all of that. I was telling you, like, without church, I want more people to go to church, because without some sort of belief that people have, like Christianity or, that type of stuff, they're going to fill it with something much eviler. And we're seeing that take place, in my opinion, today. You know what I mean? Like, even like Becker was talking about going to church and stuff now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
crazy.
yeah, never would have expected it. The fatherless thing is also huge. It's interesting when you say that, because I'm trying to put myself in those shoes, because my parents divorced when I was 3. My dad had moved 7 hours away when I was 7. Now he's still very loving. I have an amazing relationship with him. He's the reason I am the way that I am. And, and he directly influenced my thoughts. And so I think that those would be two amazing things. The third one I'd add in, because I actually agree with both of those. All the stats show two parent household is like the biggest cheat code you can get in life. Yeah, I still think the zip code thing is also pretty important, because it's going to depend on your values and all that, or not values, but like your education you're going to get. Education, man. I always just come back to, if we get into the education, that's going to lead both. It's going to lead people to better belief factories and morality, and lead people to more community. Because you brought up community, which is really interesting too. Because like every study done on happiness and longevity basically says they were very close, tight knit communities. You look at those people living like 100+ years old and stuff, and some of the places in Japan and all that. But education. But as far as like simpler fixes, let's just get everyone going to church, man. I'll go to church and listen to the message.
Like, kind of like that's what you're saying. Church brings community with it.
It does. It brings it with it. It solves many things. And like you said about the message, you don't have to be a born again Christian to go to church and walk out of there feeling fucking great. And I say that I've been several times over the years. I used to go all the time with one of my best friends in Tampa. We used to very similar conversations you and I have, me and her always had, and I love her to death. And I just never walked out of there upset that I went. Like it was never like bad. It was always like, wow, this is great. If everyone just believed and took this message and lived by it, the world would be a better place, Yeah.
And I think the other benefit of church is morality is a spectrum, and I think it gets hazy the more you're like in the world, the more you're like becoming an entrepreneur and grinding. You're like, I could make this change and we'd make more money. It's not technically right, but it's not technically wrong. And we're not really hurting anybody too much. And no one's really even going to know. Like those kinds of things start to make your morality hazy, to where you take one step, then you take another step, then you take another step. And that, I think, that's how Sam Bankman-Fried ends up committing like mass scale fraud. So I think that, by having church and having like a written book that clearly defines right and wrong, it just keeps your moral compass like heading in the right direction.
I know you're on the journey of religion right now, and like studying and like kind of figuring that all out. Based on where you're at right now, do you think that morality is set, like is objective? Like morality is like that there's a moral lawgiver essentially, like, and that morality doesn't come from collective consensus, but rather from God or from an intelligent source?
Yeah, I mean, the more I look into it, the more I'm like, I feel like it does come from God. Uh, because when you leave, like the Lord of the Flies example, like when you leave morality up to man, they will always end up like, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius is a whole book of him, his diary of trying to decide. I'm sure you've read it because you've read everything.
Of course.
Of trying to decide.
I'm going to walk through where he wrote it. I'm going to Athens in a couple of weeks, going through Stoic. Yeah.
He's trying to decide like what's right, what's wrong. How can I be a better person? How can I be a good leader? So even somebody like that who is, super powerful, has to do deep reflection just to figure out like, am I a good person? So think of the average person who just gets up and does their job and goes to work and whatever. Like morality will get very hazy to the point where you're like, I shouldn't cheat on my wife, but she does neglect me sometimes. She's kind of a bitch sometimes. And you can justify immoral decisions relatively easy the more you, again, rely on your feelings.
Interesting. And you don't believe that, or you think that morality is subjective?
Oh, I definitely think it comes from the specific moral code we're talking about comes from God for sure. Straight through the Bible. Because I also, like we talked about before, I think that without some sort of code to follow, humans tend to resort to chaos, right? Like it's exactly. Not, consensus is very difficult, right? Just think about the Vikings, the pillagers, the murders that they go through, they cheat, they rape, they, pillage, all of that type of stuff. And as I've had this conversation several times with, like I said, with one of my old business partners, one of my best friends, and he was like, no, I think humans would come to that consensus on their own. I'm like, there's literally no evidence of that throughout human history that we would come to a consensus of a moral code outside of the Bible and the Western Judeo values. So I absolutely.
Okay. So how do you, just quickly, how do you define God? Like who do you
source.
think? Source. Okay. And you think it is intelligent though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because back to the racism thing with that, I think that like.
Depending on how we define intelligent.
Infinite intelligence in a singular source.
Yeah, but I mean, it would just depend. Yes, I do think it's intelligent. I think that everything is like perfect and it's created and all that type of stuff. And like
do you believe that? Do you believe that the world and humans were created with intelligent design? Like it was specifically and intelligently designed for a purpose and a reason.
I don't know a purpose and a reason, but I do think that there was. Yes, I think for the purpose of the conversation. Yeah.
Because back to the racism thing, like I think that. Particularly on the left, when people are like, how dare you, horrible racist piece of shit, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, but like, do you believe in God? They're like, no, I don't prescribe that religious bullshit, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, but like, then what makes racism wrong? Right? Because it's like, you know what I'm saying?
I agree.
And I think that that's where, like, at the extremes of things, it's like, if you don't have morality, then racism isn't wrong. So then if you're saying that you don't subscribe to a God, and you think that morality is just this collective, so then if collectives think that black people are less than white people, then that's right? If that's where
we've seen that happen throughout,
like literally throughout history, right? And so that's why it's like it just always seems like the people that are pushing the whole, and not even just racism, just any social issue, social justice issue of like, this, they're the ones that oftentimes don't even know where they get their morality from. They're like, it's bad. And it's like, well, but from what? All right, JR. So one piece of parting advice, like, what do you think is a practical frame or lens that people should think about, like, racism / this conversation, like one practical piece of advice or frame that, I think frame is the better word, like lens that they should think about things that are moving forward?
Bro, honestly, I would just take it back to church and be like, give church a try. Like I mean, one of my closest friends, Joel Kaplan,
crazy
quick story. So he, the other day we were playing basketball like 3 weeks ago now. And he's like, bro, I started going to church.
Really?
And I'm like, bro, you're the last person I ever thought would go to church. He's like, me and my wife were having issues. Like she felt like I wasn't supporting her. I felt like I was doing the best that I can. They have a new baby. And he's like, it came out of nowhere. One day I just looked at her and I was like, I think we need to go to church. He's like, I was raised in like the synagogue. I hated it. And he's like, I tried a couple churches, didn't like them. He's like, the third one I went to, as soon as I pulled up, I was like, this feels like home. And he was like, I felt like the pastor was talking to me. He's like, I've gone back every week. My life's been completely different. He's like, I don't have anxiety anymore. I realized like how much I worshiped money, how it was like the only thing that I cared about. I was a workaholic. And he's like, now number one in my life is my faith. And he's like, someone honks at me at a red light or at a green light and they're pissed. He's like, my first thought is like, I hope that person's okay. And he is the last person. I literally told him, I was like, you are the last person I would have ever expected this from. So really, when I saw like how God reached him, I was like, bro, if he can reach him, like he can reach anybody. Cause not that he was a terrible person or anything, but he was just like super, just all he cared about was like his business, his family too. But like the majority of everything was his business. Since I've started going, I felt more peace in my life than ever. Like, bro, I got this like lawsuit threat today. Usually that would stress me the fuck out. It would ruin my entire day. Like I would not have come here. I called the guy up. We talked on the phone. I was super calm. And before the call, I'm like, God, if you want me to like just give him money, just tell me. Like, I don't care about this money. Like if it comes at the cost of my peace, I don't want it.
Yeah.
And, we came to an agreement on the phone. He was super grateful. Come to find out, the reason why this guy was so stressed the fuck out about this money, his mom died 2 months ago. And he has all these like funeral expenses and medical bills and stuff. So he was just like at his wit's end. So had I come, and this guy had no case. Like I knew whatever he was going to do, he was going to lose. And I got on the phone with him and I was like, bro, you know what? Like, whatever you do, I've already talked to a lawyer. I know that you're not going to win, but I want to help you if you really feel like this. So let's come to an agreement. He was so grateful. And by the end of the call, he was like thanking me so much for like being empathetic, helping him out, hearing him out. And he felt like he could open up to me about the mom thing. I'm like, bro, that's a perfect example of like a situation where a month ago, I would have been like, fuck this guy. He doesn't deserve $1. And not that we should be giving people handouts and stuff like that, but the fact that like I took the time to understand him, empathize with him, even if I would have given him nothing back, he still, I think, would have been grateful that I took the time to like hear him out and everything. But I decided to because I felt like it was the right thing. Yeah. And that's a prime example of like how God and church has just brought so much peace to my life to where I'm like, bro, all this material stuff, like I started doing Zoom calls weekly with my pastor. We've done one so far. Got another one tomorrow. I'm excited about it. My old pastor from the first time I tried going to church in Thomasville, Georgia. And he told me on this call, he's like, I showed him this. I'll show you guys this video after, but there's a video. He's like, so what got you thinking about church? I'm like, I was scrolling through TikTok and I came across this video and it was Deion Sanders. And the guy asks him, he's like, how did you come to know Christ? And he's like, hell. He's like, I was making love to hell. I was married to hell. I was adopted by hell. He's like, I was playing in World Series and playing in Super Bowls, but I didn't have peace. He's like, I had 400 or 500 suits, but I couldn't cover up the pain. I had 200-300 pairs of shoes, but I couldn't take a step in the right direction. I had 15 cars in my driveway, but I wasn't going anywhere. I had a 15,000 square foot house, but I didn't have a home. And then he's like, when you finally get to the point and you hear, he's like, you're at the plate to bat. He's like, you're 3 for 4 that night with 3 stolen bases and you can't get that ringing out of your head. And by the time you've hit rock bottom and God calls you and God calls you collect and you don't want to answer, you don't want to accept the charges because you know it's going to cost you something. And that video got me really thinking because I was like, bro, all I've done is chase money the last few years. Chase money, try to get a 6-pack. I bought a fucking Lamborghini. I bought a fucking Rolex. I have 17 real estate properties, millions of dollars in real estate, but I have not felt peace at all in my life. If anything, all money has done was bring me more anxiety because now I'm worried about losing it. Who's going to try to take it? How are they going to try to take it? What do I need to protect against? I need to get a trust over here. I need a better insurance policy over there. I need to move money over here. I need to protect everything. And all it did was any single thing that would threaten that just caused anxiety. I got to the point where like I was up at night fucking Googling ways that people would try to take money from rich people so that I could hide it and protect against it. And all of that, I got on the call and I talked to my pastor about this, and he's like, he sends me this verse, and he tells me like, everything in this world is a mirage. It's not real. When this is all over, you'll wake up from this as if it was a dream. And it reminded me, I started really thinking about it, and it reminded me of when I was 12 years old, and I used to play this game called RuneScape. And RuneScape was a first person online game you could play with your friends. It had its own economy. Like you would chop trees, you would sell the trees, you would build crossbows, you would fight people, you would do these different quests. And from like 10 to 12, that game was the only thing that mattered to me, to where I would, during the summer, I would wake up at like noon and I'd play till like 4 a.m. straight, just grinding in this game. And it felt so real to me at that point in my life. That game was all that mattered to me. But now when I think back to that time in my life, that game feels like a mirage. Like it's like, it doesn't even matter anymore. It's like, it was a dream that was so long ago.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was all that mattered to me. And then I realized like, that's what I've been doing with life. Like I've been grinding and treating money and treating all these things as if it's real, when in reality, it didn't bring me peace. It didn't bring me joy. It didn't bring me happiness. All the things that have given me a glimpse of happiness have been around friends, community, love. So, I just got to the point where I'm like, I'm going to continue to be an entrepreneur because it's who I am. I love doing entrepreneurship, but I'm not going to make it my identity. And I started to notice it in other people that are where I was. This guy moved into my apartment building, and I've had dinner with him once in the past. And I just happened to see him in front, and he was like, "Hey, I just rented the penthouse in the apartment, 35th floor." And you could just see like the pride on his face of like, I have the best unit in this building. And then my business partner comes up. I introduced my business partner to him. Within 30 seconds of conversation, he mentioned his sales. He's like, "Oh, I run an agency. We do hundreds of millions in sales." And prior, I would have been envious of him, and I would have been like, fuck, like you need to level up. You need to figure out what he knows that you're not doing. You need to do more. You need to be more. You're not good enough. You need to make more money. Same with the Lambo. I bought the Lambo because it's just a way to feel better than other people. Same thing with watches and everything. So since going down this journey, like, bro, I can confidently tell you, and I'm the last person I ever thought would say this, I could lose every dollar in my bank account. I don't even look at it as my money. I'm like, it's God's money. The other day, my front doorman at my building, he's like, "I'm getting evicted in a couple days." And I literally prayed about it. I was like, "God, if you want me to give him money and bail him out of the situation, give me a sign. Let me know somehow." He didn't say like, there was nothing conclusive, but I literally like prayed about it. I thought about it like all day. Yeah. And normally I would have just been like, "Oh, that sucks," and just thought like, "Oh, you should have just been better at life. You should have just made more money or somehow." Yeah. But my entire life is just completely changed. Like I feel like I have empathy now. I don't worship money like I did, like most entrepreneurs do. I look at money as like, God, whatever you want me to, like, we're in the process of making some big moves in business. And I'm like, God, whatever you want me to do next. Like, if you want me to go be a construction worker, I'll go be a construction worker. If you want me to go do ministry, I'll go do ministry. If you want me to build another business, tell me what business to build. How do you want me to use this money as a steward for other people? It's just been a complete 180. And this has been in like 2 weeks. So like every day I'm like consuming, reading the Bible. I'm like trying to hear like what should my next move be? Because the biggest thing I told my pastor is like, I am at the point where I have realized I am not strong enough for this life. Everything in my mind has been about how to be better, how to be better to rise to the occasion. Constantly just putting my pressure of like, everything's on me. All these people's jobs are on me. My whole family, my family depends on me. I have to cover all these bills all the time. I need to make sure I'm putting money away for retirement. Like pressure. I have this statue of Atlas in my house. That's how I felt all the time, just like holding the weight of the world. And then looking at people like Elon Musk and be like, dude, how the fuck is he doing all that? And I can't even like manage a team of 50 people. So, yeah, it's just completely changed my life.
Yeah. That's awesome, dude. Well, welcome to church.
That was a big answer.
Welcome to Jesus. That's awesome, dude. Heck yeah. That's super, super cool to hear. I don't think we can top that. I think we ended the
hell no. That was one of the greatest things I've ever heard.
That was incredible.
Amazing. Fully support that message 100%. So good. Amazing.
All right. We're going to end it there. Nick Robbins and I'll have to have a follow-up on the Jesus conversation. But well done, sir. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Make sure to subscribe so that I can go buy a Lambo. I'm just kidding. Also, Bitcoin sees no color, race, or gender. You should all buy Bitcoin, and it's Jesus' money. Bye.